This is a follow-on video from the last video I did about the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin trial, the murder trial. As you know, as I said in that last video, I think that verdict was wrong. It was unfair. Because I think it was impossible for Derek Chauvin to get a fair trial, owing to the amount of a year's worth of universally negative publicity or condemnation of him. He'd already been tried and convicted in the media. And I think that's part of an increasing tendency towards politicized justice, and in this instance politicized by the BLM mania, which I think is in turn a result of America basing itself on ideals instead of ethnicity. I don't think you can realistically base a nation on ideals, and I think the problem of doing so with this Derek Chauvin trial is one symptom of it. The belonging basically requires a sense of identity. That's what people get from a sense of nationhood, is a sense of identity, and you don't get identity from ideals or from politics. In general, politics is downstream of ideals, ideals are downstream of culture, culture is downstream of ethnicity, and ethnicity is downstream of race. Now, I don't think people wake up every morning, don't get me wrong, I don't think everyone suddenly thinks as soon as they wake up, oh goody, I'm a member of the white race, or I'm even a member of the black race. I don't think people think that so consciously about race. The key word, I think, is ethnicity, which I would define as being halfway between race and culture. Basically, that's what people get a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, being amongst people who look, speak, think and act like you, have the same enjoyments and similar values to yours. And that creates a sense of ethnicity, and that is really what people stick to for the sense of belonging, the sense of home. It's a natural and I think inevitable need and craving that people have, and you can't substitute ideals for that. It is, you base a nation on a sense of nationhood. Nationhood, the root of the word is nativity, birth. It's about sort of your birth line. I think that involves ideas of genetics and long birth line, birth inheritance, including race. Unfortunately, because race has exclusive connotations. I think I'm backed up on that by it's ironic, I'm backed up on that by the Equality Act, the 2010 UK Equality Act, which defines race as including colour, ethnic or a national origin or nationality. Now, I mean, if I just show you, I'll show you the act itself. Hold on, if I just do this, and there, if you see that there, so that's the Equality Act of 2010. If I go to the top, it's a long act, the Equality Act. You go down to clause 9, and it states that race includes colour, nationality, ethnic or national origin. So it's basically identifying nationality and national origins with race, or nationality with race. What I find ironic is that if I were to do that, and to say the wrong words, I could probably get myself in prison for a year, quite a long time. But and this is part of the picture. It's okay for authorities to talk about it, but fear is to be spread when ordinary people start to make up their own minds about it. And that I think shows a theme of very mild, I would say, very low level terror, fear that governments are employing. This is very, very common for governments to do this. And if you define terror as causing some harm to people in order to achieve a political end through the spread of fear, then this is a very, very low level form of terror. It's basically a way of saying, we might get you. You step out of line, we'll get you. And you don't quite know the limits. You don't really know where you can't predict how you can stay out of trouble. So just keep off the issue altogether. And that brings me back to the Derek Chauvin George Floyd trial, which had came to a wrong verdict. The jury, I think, were wrong. they came to a wrong verdict. It happens, and it was a result of the excessively negative publicity, where you had everyone, I mean, even on the right amongst conservatives, Douglas Murray, Candace Owens, Victor Davis Hanson, these were all considered great intellectual big hitters on the right, all condemning him out of hand without citing any evidence at all as to why Derek Chauvin was guilty, just saying he committed an absolutely heinous, horrible, terrible act. And you had a year of non-stop publicity over that, and I think that's why it was impossible for him to get acquitted. Now, that is probably unavoidable in America, and America basing itself wrongly, I think it is a mistaken experiment to base itself on ideals, has as one of its ideals, perhaps one of its founding ideals, the First Amendment to the Constitution, is the right to free speech, which basically the government can't take away, can't suspend, can't abrogate. And so the way that in America, the way trials seek to strike a balance between free speech and not influencing the jury is to allow free speech to continue, but you sequester the jury when it's considering its verdict. And that's completely unrealistic. As this case shows, you have the whole of society knowing one thing for certain, and that is that Derek Chauvin was guilty. He did a terrible thing. He is a murderer. You had it said, huge demonstrations on the streets, and everyone on pretty much every media outlet appearing to say so. And as a result of that, I think that that problem of influencing the jury it arises inevitably out of the American Constitution. In English law, it's different. We do it the other way around. We say, well, basically, once someone's been charged, the press and the media, that they're not allowed to talk about the case, or very little. We effectively, we don't get rid of the right to free speech. We suspend the right to free speech on issues affecting the trial whilst that trial is going on. And I think that's the right way of doing it. I think it's the right way of doing it because I think free and fair trials are more important than the right to free speech. If you don't have justice, if the courts are bent, you can have all the constitutional guarantees in the world, you will not have the right to free speech. So I think it is reasonable and realistic to suspend that right to free speech while the trial is going on. That's why I think Tommy Robinson was rightly imprisoned when he, time and again, kept interfering with trials whilst they were going on and committing contempt of court. It's important that you have fair trials that come to the right verdict, or as close to the right verdict as you can get. Now, that's if you're able to influence the right to a fair trial, you get rid of the safeguard. That is the ultimate safeguard that citizens have, and then you can create an awful lot of fear, an awful lot of unfairness, and you will scare people out of free speech. And that, I think, is a consistent theme in Britain, in France, and in America. And here I'm talking about America. It's not because I'm singling out America here in this video, but not in general. I'm not trying to have a go at America in particular. I'd like to talk later about future videos about Britain and France. But in America, what you have is I think what you've had is a series of unfair trials, unfair verdicts. First of all, you had the one that I talked about last time. That was the Larry Nassar sentencing. Just to recap, Larry Nassar, he was the doctor for the USA women's or girls gymnastics team, abused his position to commit a terrible string of very exploitative, calculated abuse on young teenage girls. It was a horrible series of offences that he pleaded guilty to. No doubt he's guilty, but the court, the fact that he's guilty and the offences are horrible, that doesn't give the court or the judge the excuse to descend into the fray and effectively to descend into the courtroom, into the well of the court, which the judge did in this case. This judge lost her impartiality, appears to have been quite proud of it, descending into the fray. What I'd like to do is to play part of that, what she did. If I play that here, if I show you this, bear with me. If I just show you what she did, if I turn that on.
She decided to allow any victim who wanted to speak. It turned out to be 156.
I know the truth, and I know I'm worthy of sharing my story.
I've done
That's
this
the
for
court
15
hearing.
years, so I know that when I talk to a victim, it is healing for them because it's the power of the robe. And I try to use my gavel for justice. Sometimes I have to pound it for law and order, and sometimes it really should be seen as a wand of healing.
It was sort of seen by some as piling on. Okay, he's pled guilty. He's going to go to prison for a long time. Why take court time, court resources?
I know there are critics. I've heard from them. And maybe they'll disbar me. Do I care? I'd do it again. If I can't do this, I'll walk off the bench and lobby for it. It's the right thing to do.
That is pure Aquilina. Confident, brash.
Okay, so you see that? That is her basically saying, if people criticize me, well, my gavel is a wand of healing. Okay, no, a judge's gavel is not a wand of healing. She would do it again because she wants to side with those girls. No, her duty is to be impartial and to sentence impartially. The best way I can think of expressing it is the way that Fletch in Porridge put it. If I play this, you'll get a good idea. This is Ronnie Barker in Porridge. Right, if you listen to a few seconds of this, about 45 seconds, okay. Oops, hold on, let me just do this again. There.
You did it, Fletcher, you told us that. That's beside the point, Gobbler.
It did seem relevant when I passed sentence.
The point is, he's unfit to sentence me, as his presence here indicates.
Well, he's still a judge, or he were at the time.
Yeah, well, obviously I've bent one. When you're sent down, it's one thing known as an upright pillar of society. But Fletcher's been sent down by a fella con.
Yeah, thank you very much, Job. You see, he's just like me. How do you think I feel being sent down by a crook like me?
Yeah, so that's him putting it well. How do you think I feel being sent down by a crook like me? Okay, now let me just go back to where I was. There's and that's what but by that, I'm not saying that judge in that sentencing was a crook, but I'm saying she lost her impartiality for political reasons. Now and what you can say to that is, well, he did it, he admits he did it, he pleaded guilty, it was a horrible crime, I would never do that, doesn't affect me, it's no threat to me. Okay, the next one is Harvey Weinstein. He didn't plead guilty, he went through a trial. I think he was a pretty unpleasant man, a bully, exploitative, clever, calculating, forceful, but I don't think his trial was fair. I think a lot of unfair evidence was admitted to that trial and he got convicted. I don't think it was possible, again, for him to get a fair trial. He was, everyone assumed that he must be guilty because there was so much publicity, which there shouldn't have been, which arises out of the American system. Now what you can say is, well, that doesn't affect me. I'm glad he got an unfair trial. He was a nasty man, he did some nasty things, and so I'm not in danger from that. You can say that. Okay, then if you say that, then you come to the Derek Chauvin trial. And I think his conviction was his trial was even less fair than Harvey Weinstein's trial. He pleaded guilty. I don't think he was guilty. It wasn't simply that he was convicted on unfair evidence. I think he was innocent of the charges that were put against him, but that were put to him. What you could say is, well, he didn't have to kneel on George Floyd's neck so long, even if it was an authorised non-lethal restraint. He was really stupid. I'm not a cop, I'd never be so stupid, so that doesn't affect me. I'm not under threat there. Okay, and then what you proceed to is what's called the Dante Wright shooting, where a police officer called Kim Potter, she is now charged with second-degree murder because she shot him with a gun instead of a taser. She mixed up a taser and her gun and meant to tase him and got him with her gun. Now what I want to do is I want to show you a little bit of video of that one. Now there, you might have seen this already, but if I play this, there's that fella, Dante Wright, getting arrested. That's Kim Potter, the police officer, with you see her hands there. He jumps in his car and she's shouting, "Taser, taser." Yeah. I'll tase you. Taser. I just shot him. Okay, so if I go back to here, now that lady. Now that looks like a mistake to me, but she's charged with second-degree manslaughter. That I don't see how manslaughter arises out of that. You can say it was careless, it was a stupid mistake, but not only is she charged with manslaughter and fired, but the local police chief, who said, I've looked at the video, that looks like a horrible accident to me. The day after he said that, he had to retire. He was forced out, or he did resign. He resigned from his post. I reckon he was probably forced out by adverse publicity. And you can say, well, I'm not a cop, it's a stupid mistake, it's not a mistake that I would make, so it doesn't affect me. I'm not threatened by that. Well, then you come to the Micaiah Bryant case, which you might have seen recently. That's the one where the cop shoots dead this, puts 4 bullets into a one girl who's trying to stab another one. So if I play you some of that, let me just bring that up here. There we go. Now if I do that, you might have seen this one. There's the cop getting out of his car. You see, he comes running out. He's taking a good swing at her. Oh, there you are.
Told from interim police chief Michael Wood.
You see, she's just going to stab that other lady, that other girl there.
And that she was coming at one of the women. She was approaching a woman with a knife in her hand when that officer opened fire.
All right, so that's now what I want to do is go back to there. Now that man so far, that cop, has not been charged, but what he has been subject to is a tweet by this fella LeBron James. You see him there, he's a basketball player, so he's got a big following, so he knows a lot about the legal system. You see there, LeBron James, you're next, with the hourglass accountability, and publishing a picture of the policeman who shot that woman who was trying to stab the other woman. Looks like she was trying to stab her to death, really going for the throat with that kitchen knife by the look of it. And but so far that cop has not been charged, but there are a couple of investigations going on against him. What you've got is state authorities are apparently, according to The Guardian, state authorities are now investigating, and City Police Safety Director Ned Pettus denounced the death at the hands of a police officer, and he said, he was a black man, and said, she could have been my grandchild. I think you know what he's trying to say there. And he said the video footage shows there is more to this. I don't think it does. It just shows that that policeman was protecting one black woman from a lethal threat from another black woman. But again, you might say, well, you know, if that police officer gets prosecuted, well, I'm not a cop and I'd just stay out of it. I wouldn't get involved in cases like that. I'd know it doesn't affect me. I'm not threatened by that. Okay, but if you say that, be careful where this ends. This is going to end. We are heading towards a kind of anti-racist McCarthyism. I think we're pretty close to it already. The purpose being to create fear and vulnerability. And you might think, well, no government wants to do that. Why would they want to do that? It's just too much effort. It just degrades society. They want to do that because it gives them power. Now, this is best, I best heard this summarised by Malcolm Muggeridge, an old geezer, he's long dead, very good, always had a nose for getting things right, complicated character. But he was in Russia in, I think, 1932 under Stalin. And this is what he said about getting social discipline worked out. If I just play you this, if you can see this. Okay, there he is. That's Malcolm Muggeridge. I think that was probably the 1980s that got recorded.
He managed to get an interview with a man in the GPU. And
he's talking about a colleague of his, a fellow he knew, who got an interview with someone with the KGB, the GPU. Okay.
He told me afterwards that the question that he asked him, which had produced the most emphatic response, was he asked this man why the GPU arrested innocent people. And this man, to his amazement, began to laugh at such a question. And he said, but of course you have to arrest innocent people, because it's only if you do that that other people are frightened. If you simply arrest people for having committed this or that crime, then other people think, well, I'll avoid this or that crime and I'll be secure. But if you create the feeling that any citizen at any time is open to a charge, then you really have got social discipline worked out.
Okay, so that's Malcolm Muggeridge, very smart man, worth looking at. But there, what you see, what he says, I think, is right. That if you create the feeling that any citizen at any time is open to a charge, then you really have got social discipline worked out. You have social control. If you can put people in a constant state of fear, thinking, are they going to come for me next? Am I next in line? What's to stop them getting me? Now, a much lesser thing than Stalinism happened with McCarthyism in the 1940s and 50s in America. I think there was red infiltration, it needed to be dealt with, but it was dealt with through witch hunts and the spreading of fear, which is very nice for politicians because it gives them a lot of power. And the main victims of McCarthyism, they weren't the big fancy movie directors or other politicians or people working in the CIA. They were people who just got fingered for private vendettas or for no reason at all, because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. You had 3,000 sailors and longshoremen, people who load the boats, getting fired for reasons of, quote, port security. And you had 5,000 federal workers fired for being gay under what was called the lavender scare, where if you were gay you were seen to be suspect and you could get fired. And you have many more people than that outed and harassed and denied jobs. Say you're a gay guy quietly living under the radar, maybe your family don't know about it, your employer doesn't know about it, and you're caught going to gay bars. Or say you're not a gay guy and you've got gay friends, you go to a gay bar now and again, or there are other people in your family, say. You can be intimidated, you can be squeezed, you can be harassed, you can be denied employment. Your boss can come to you and say, I want you to inform on someone, I want you to snitch, I want you to give evidence against someone, I want you to do a job you don't want to do. And if you don't, I'll accuse you. And it doesn't matter if it's a false accusation. You're likely to be fired and you might not work again. What are you going to do? That's the kind of control that it gave people. And people will be coerced under that kind of pressure. Often there are a lot of people quite like being coerced like that and will enthusiastically go along with it. And it's quite disturbing. It's quite disturbing to see that. But the bottom line is that that's extremely convenient to government. And that, I think, is what we're seeing at the moment. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, which is going to be very confusing to a lot of people. Why do you want to scare us like this? Why do you, the government, want to appear to be, all parties appearing to want to be our enemies in that way, kind of out to get us? Why are you giving us that feeling? It just seems wrong in a democracy. Well, because it makes the democratic population easier to rule, more scared, more manageable. That on top of the PC multiculturalist tendency to undermine people by denying a sense of ethnicity and identity that people want and need for their sense of resilience. Now, I don't think we're quite at that level of McCarthyism yet, but that is where we're headed. That's the vector force, the trajectory that we're on. Now, in some ways, I think it's worse than it was under McCarthyism. I think it's longer lasting. I think we've had this PC multiculturalism going on for more than a decade. McCarthyism lasted for a bit under a decade, realistically. And it worked not through law, incidentally, but through administrative mechanisms. So President Eisenhower would sign an administrative measure saying that homosexuals or sexual perversion, I think he signed some order saying sexual perversion was a reason to fire people from government jobs. And so you get a feeling of fear and people just looking over their shoulders, government employees and others, people who might want to work for government or people who work for companies that have government contracts. And I think we have something similar with regards to racism and anti-racism and the PC multicultural craze. I think we have a similar level of fear, but it's already lasted longer than it's lasted 20 years, I would say. I think it's going to last a lot longer, and get pushed further. It is accelerating at the moment. Now, I want you to compare. The reason I say that in some ways it is worse now than it was then is I'd like to show you a video of Ronald Reagan before the House Un-American Activities Committee, because it's actually milder than I think it would be today if they were rooting out racists rather than communists. So let me just do this again and I'll show you this one. Okay, now if you see that, there's Ronald Reagan, if you recognize him. Okay.
Next on the list of witnesses,
so he's in front of the House Un-American Activities
I will be
Committee.
frank with you that as a citizen I would hesitate, or I would not like to see any political party outlawed on the basis of its political ideology, because we've spent 170 years in this country on the basis that democracy is strong enough to stand up and fight for itself against the inroads of any ideology, no matter how much we may disagree with it. But at the same time, I never, as a citizen, want to see our country become so, or become urged by either fear or resentment of this group that we ever compromise with any of our democratic principles through that fear or resentment.
Well, we agree
I
with
still
that,
think
too.
that democracy can do it.
We agree with that. We agree with that. Thank you very much.
So you hear that, and the committee he's saying, I wouldn't ban the Communist Party, and the committee, that's the supposedly the McCarthyite committee, the House Un-American Activities Committee, saying, yeah, we agree with you. I think it is very difficult to imagine the opposite happening. So let's say I can't imagine Congress saying that people should be allowed to advocate discrimination, racial discrimination, or that people should just simply be allowed to discriminate, let alone, that people should be allowed to advocate or carry out pro-white racial discrimination. It's impossible to imagine someone sitting on a congressional committee saying, yeah, I agree that people should be allowed to do that, that shouldn't be illegal. Now, I'm not saying that I think America will get to that McCarthyite position, and worse. I think it is likely to become worse than that before things break down. That is certainly, even if it doesn't, that is the trajectory that America is on. That is what the powers that be want. It serves their power interests extremely well, undermining, dividing, grinding down people, and injecting a pervasive element of fear. A little fear goes a long, long way. And it's not only the case with America. This, I think, is how the most noticeable way that it's happening in America. I think it's also happening in England and France. I want to deal with that in future videos, England and France. In France especially, unusually, where there might be some first signs of forceful opposition coming. So I'll talk about that then.